pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Board of Supervisors meeting on July the 29th, 2025. Is there any changes to the agenda?
I have none.
None? Okay. Moving on, we shall meet with department heads and elected officials. How's the auditor's office going, Cheryl?
We're just keeping busy.
Keep busy?
Yeah. Nothing new to
Thanks. Colin, AT?
Good morning, nothing new to report, just keeping busy like always. That's all I got.
Thank you. Shannon, how's the emergency management?
Well-
Did you order that storm last night?
You know, they said it was gonna go north of us, and we did get a little touch of it, didn't we? Lots of rain, so, I did wanna touch on if there is anybody that has, flooding in their basement, the Salvation Army does have flood kits available. They have like bleach and gloves and things to clean up. So you can always go over to the Salvation Army and get one of those. There's no income requirement, nothing like that. Otherwise, just keep them busy like everyone else.
Thank you. Rodney, how's maintenance department?
Good morning, doing okay. Weather's hard on people and equipment, but everything, trying to keep everybody cool, but everything's going pretty well so far.
Good. Thank you. Angie, safety department.
Good morning, just nothing going on much, keeping busy, watching everyone, making sure everyone's getting enough fluids and electrolytes during all this heat. I think, hopefully, it sounds like this weekend things are gonna start breaking and maybe cool down a little bit for us, so we'll say a little prayer for that.
Okay, thank you. Chris Lee, conservation.
We're having a great time. So I got back from a few days off yesterday. We've got rainwater getting into the nature center. It's kind of hasn't really flooded my office, but it got my office floor all wet over my underneath my nice floating laminate floor, and it soaked up into a bookcase, ruined some historic maps that I had piled into a corner, drained across, and we had a little bit of a trickle running all the way across the nature center, all the way to the staff office there. So we got all that dried up, and I've got part of my floor pulled up. We're trying to dry that out. I had a tree come down on Friday right onto our bridge over by the cave and smoked just the railing on the bridge. I mean, I'm right down perfectly square in the center of a railing section, bent the square tubing all up, and so I've been in contact with Brian about doing a bridge inspection. We're actually on the list to have the bridge, we do a biannual inspection. We're on the list to have that done here very soon anyway, so we might just roll that in together, but
Is that railing a structural component?
the railing I don't think is, and certainly not down there, because that's where it actually meets the cliff, but I'm gonna need somebody smarter than me to.
No, the railing's not a structural component. The only question is, did it in any way twist any of the substructure type stuff, or move it's fairly close to the abutment area, it looked
Yeah.
like, and
Yeah.
did it do anything there? So I was gonna try to get out there sometime just to take I guess as good a look as you can look. In that location, that's not a very easy spot to look at, it doesn't look like, but the railing itself would not be structural.
Thank you.
So that's fun, and then just, all the heat and the wet, and the river's just kinda hanging out a little bit below flood stage, and so we've got people that want docks out, and we're a little hesitant to go putting them out, because we have one big rain in Davenport, and the river's out of its banks. So anyway, it's just one time, but I'm looking forward to this break in the weather here later this week. So, yeah,
Okay,
crank along.
thank you. Jared, regional planning.
We're keeping busy as usual. We have, don't have anything on the agenda for today apart from the work session, although we do have a zoning commission meeting this evening. I'll keep you guys updated depending on where that discussion goes on the business there. But other than that, just keeping busy as usual.
Okay, thank you. Lisa, Attorney's office?
We're always busy. We've actually enjoyed the little heat wave because people stay inside in the air conditioning. Getting ready for National Night Out. Next week, we'll probably be getting the proclamation on the agenda for next week to have read by the board. Terry and Aaron are in their second week of a child sex abuse trial. Hopefully that case will get done because Aaron leaves on vacation, and that means I have to go sit in with Terry, and I have other things to do. Including getting ready for 2 jury trials next week. Then we'll have a little bit of a respite through the rest of the summer, but we're just staying really, really busy.
Okay, thank you. Sheriff Glendenning, I see you snuck in the back door.
Yes, Gerald's at 81 this morning. We have 8 out of county. Numbers are looking pretty good out there for the summer. Other than that, we're just very busy as everyone else. Keeping up with things, but kind of normal for this time of year. That's about all I have for the board.
Okay, thank you. Manley, how's the recorder's office?
Good morning. I think everything's going well. I too just got back in the office off a few days out at the fair. So it's nice to be back in the air conditioning because it was hot. But yep, just keeping busy, still working on the indexing of the historical documents that we got scanned in. So will take us quite some time, but otherwise just business as usual.
Okay, thank you. Brian, how's the secondary roads?
Doing well. Plenty of stuff going on, but the major projects that I've been talking about are closed forever are open and we're mostly out of the way. We have a little bit of stuff to do. The gear bridge with all this rain has water coming down that hill has shown us some issues, obviously, so we're gonna try to deal with those as part of the tail end of that contract. So there may still be a one-lane dynamic coming in the future, depending on what we decide to do there. Otherwise, 99 is, I'll say, all but complete. We still gotta go through some federal aid type stuff for checklists, but all but complete. The bridges are open, and now the pile of paperwork for the guys starts in earnest, and that's the unfortunate part sometimes of the federal funds. But otherwise, plenty of stuff going on. But we are doing a little bit of patching throughout the county. So we had so many blow-ups in the old concrete roads this spring and summer that the ones that are small enough we're trying to do. We normally do the removals ourselves and bring a contractor in to do the concrete work, and we still do that on the bigger ones, but where we can, the smaller ones, we're trying to do the concrete work ourselves. So just pay attention when you're out and about, because you might come across a one-lane closure. There'll be signs and stuff like that, but we're finally getting started on trying to get some of those put back together and taken care of, rather than just having being rough and cold patching. So there's always something to do, and a lot of folks noticing water standing around. So a lot of discussions about the fact that when you get that much rain, water's going to stand around. So.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Correspondence. Neither of you gentlemen have any correspondence?
I did not.
I did not. We don't have any here, so we shall move on to discussion and vote. We have an approval of the lease agreement with the imaging and the possibilities. This lease agreement, Rod, do you know more about this than us? You've been working on this.
On that one, I believe Trent's been working on that one.
Trent's been
It's,
working on this.
it's my understanding Trent discussed this with, Imagine the Possibilities attorneys, and they've agreed on what's in front of us.
Yes, that's my understanding as well.
Okay.
So, this is, the
This
goal of
is-
it was to, yeah, go ahead.
It's a commercial lease agreement is made and effective August 1st, 2025 between Des Moines County being the landlord and Imagining the Possibilities, the tenant. Landlord is the owner of the land and improvements commonly known as, numbered as. We got these parcels here. Douglas Avenue, Burlington, Iowa is 2001, 1905 Douglas Avenue, 1819 Douglas Avenue, 1804 Douglas Avenue, 2117 Northern Drive, 2101 Northern Drive, 2205 Northern Drive, 2209 Northern Drive, 1901 Racine Avenue, 1903 Racine Avenue. Landlord desires to lease the premises to tenants, and the tenant desires to lease the premises to landlord for the term and the rental upon both conditions and previously set forth. Therefore, in consideration of mutual promises herein contained and other good and valuable considerations, it is agreed. The landlord leases the leased premises to tenant, and the tenant hereby leases the same from landlord on a month-to-month basis starting August 1st, 2025, and will continue on a month-to-month tenancy. To terminate, the landlord and the tenant must give the other a written 30-day notice of lease, non-renewal at 30 days prior to the last day of that month.
Motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Cheryl?
Tom Broger?
Yes.
Shane McCampbell?
Yes.
Jim Carrey?
Yes. We have a personnel action for the attorney's office for Brandon Little, to leave of 23.31 hours.
Motion to approve. Second.
Cheryl?
Tom Broger?
Yes.
Shane McCampbell?
Yes.
Jim Carrey?
Yes. That's actually 22.
Yes, it does.
We
We
can do that.
We can
after.
probably do that by hand. We've got our initials on it. Just go ahead and put 29 over 22. They could change that after the meeting. I don't see the county attorney scowling at me.
Just a scrivener's error, that's
Now we have the minutes for the regular meeting on July the 22nd, 2025.
Motion to approve minutes.
Second.
Sarah, or not Sarah, Cheryl?
Shane McCampbell?
Yes.
Tom Broger?
Yes.
Jim Carrey?
Yes. I'm gonna go do this. We have any other business? Future agenda items? Just work session for coming up, complete the wind ordinance. Committee reports.
I had a Mississippi Valley Workforce Development Board, but it was just making sure we all voted on that merger.
I had none.
I had none either. We did get an email for a Zoom meeting on that too.
I should mention, we had a Highway 61 Coalition meeting yesterday. I only should mention that because I attend those obviously, and Bob Beck attends those on your guys' behalf. So that would normally be a board member thing, but he's the appointed member for that. So I mentioned that to you. We're trying to kind of get that back to being a more active group, even though the project is making good progress. There's some other stuff along the way we'd like the DOT to continue to focus on. So we're kind of looking at some stuff within the Burlington corridor, since that corridor certainly needs significant work and upkeep and stuff like that. So just so you know, there was a meeting on that. Bob was there.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, public input. We'll give the public 2 minutes to call 319-753-8203, extension 4. That's 319-753-8203, extension 4. Or email board@dmcounty.com. It will be board@dmcounty.com. Meanwhile, anybody here, anything to say?
I have a question.
Yes.
So this this lease of these properties with Imagine, it says it's $1 per month. What are these properties used for, and why is it $1, and?
Well, this goes back to Hope Haven. This is all
Sure.
Hope Haven stuff. And that's back in, go over the paperwork, that's back when they first started this, they leased it out for $1. So
Okay.
we're just keeping the same $1 a month.
It's a
So it's
continuation
taken
of-
over.
Okay.
Instead it was Hope Haven, it's with Imagine.
Okay, so it's just with a different,
Just, yeah.
that's the difference, is it's changed to that name?
Well, Hope Haven, yeah, I guess. Lisa-
Hope Haven is
Yeah.
no longer its own separate entity.
Right.
So for insurance purposes and other legal purposes, those leases have to be in the name of Mention the
Okay,
Possibilities.
all right, okay, thank you. Thanks.
Some of you are smiling.
A quick update on some of the changes we've seen from mental health with some of the switch over from the regions to the districts to the state. The state took on providing for mental health and telehealth in our correctional facilities. But we really didn't know that until right at the end of June. July 1st is when they signed, and many correctional centers had already signed contracts to provide medical and mental health treatment inside the correctional centers, as you are aware. We're working on amending that contract with Advanced Correctional Healthcare, but we are bringing in Flow State, who's one of the two providers for the state to provide mental health care via telehealth and in person as needed. So hopefully we'll be able to amend our contract. They've indicated that that's a possibility to amend this year's contract for those hours of providing mental health, because then that'll be diverted to the state and that'll get direct billed. But this is a step in the direction of the HHS and Medicaid taking over the mental health prescription medications also, which is a big part of that contract as well. So we're taking that step. We're onboarding next Monday with Flow State and still in the works of amending that contract with ACH.
Keep us informed on that too, because over the last few years, there's been a lot of controversy over.
So much movement.
Yeah.
And I think there's people that really care, that are trying to make decisions and do what's best. But it does make it hard when it's July 1st, when we're already entering into contracts. But they're getting things in line, and hopefully this will set the tone for the future until they change it again.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yep.
Well, I guess 2 minutes are up, so.
Aye.
Aye. We're gonna have a work session here, give us about a 5-minute break, and we'll have a work session on the wind ordinance with the wildlife. And when you speak, if I can remind you to state your name, so, because we're recording this, state your name when you speak. Thank you. Okay, Trent, we'll turn this over to you.
Oh, okay. Well, Jared had been kind of leading the draft for this. But as far as we're working on the wildlife monitoring mitigation chapter this week. So, when you look at that, I think that this, well, first of all, everything is in yellow in this one because this is just a whole section we didn't have in our original ordinance. So you brought the whole thing in from Henry County.
Right.
Yeah.
Or Lee County,
Lee County.
that had been identified as a priority there, and so we did some research into what other counties have done, and then ran it by the supervisors and the county conservation there, and had public feedback opportunities as well, so basically starting with what they have, and then seeing if there's additional questions and recommendations that people have for the Des Moines County ordinance.
Right. So, so that's that. I don't have a ton of changes, I do have some recommended changes. As we get to B3, we're listing in, and this is kind of consistent throughout, but there it says demonstrate or demonstrable evidence that none of the components of the CWES, CSES, and or CBES will have a direct, indirect negative impact on any wildlife species. So we need to add into that. I was having a hard time getting into the agenda. Apologize for that. We need to add into that solar, because we have solar in this as well.
You're talking about B3.
That's the CSES.
Oh, that is, so
Yes.
CSAS is solar? Okay.
Yeah, so anytime you see the CWES, CSES, CBES, that's wind energy systems, solar energy systems, battery energy
Okay,
storage
perfect.
systems.
Okay, good. Okay, and then as we get to 5, so in 5A, it says prevention of collision indoor electrocution of avian and bat species. So I think, Aiden, do you want to add the Indiana bat?
Well, bat species.
Okay,
May I speak to that very quickly? I have information for you.
okay, go ahead.
Don't mean to interrupt you, but that's why I'm late this morning. I'm Darren Shea from Minneapolis. This is for you, not for you. This is a 5-year work study. Just got off the line with U.S. Fish and Wildlife. They're doing a 5-year work study that's gonna be completed, a work plan. You have 13 endangered species. Who else should I give this to? Anybody else?
Yeah, one of us, we don't vote in it, but.
Who wants it? Okay, there we go. I was talking to a gentleman, sorry. His name is Andrew King. He's heading up this work plan that they review, and they have 13 endangered species that they look at. They do a 5-year review. The Indiana bat is on that review. They were gonna be completed, sorry, I ran up the stairs. They just completed they're gonna be completing at the end of this calendar year, the 5-year study for that. So, and they would like to get the information from the DNR of Iowa about what's down here at Stark Cave and Big Hollow as to the bat population. We did have, there is a biologist who's been studying this named Russell Benedict out of Central College, who's been at Sperry at Big Hollow for the last 12 years. So he needs to be contacted, or maybe you have, I don't know, the conservation officers here. But anyway, in this study, they shows on the work plan, you can see from the Federal Registry where the Indiana bat is being looked at. And he said it should be done by the end of the year to tell us the populations. If you look on this page here, you'll see the Indiana bat, where they're located, and here in Iowa. So that is on their 5-year work plan and their study. It is highly endangered, it's been on the endangered species list since 1967, and they keep reviewing it. And we do have, luckily, we do have some down here. Population is down about 88% in Des Moines County right now. So I just want to give that to you, and I think we need to take a good look at that to see, to get that information before we go forward with anything, to see what this study says. So, and I give you the contact information to the conservation officer, so they can get that information to the Iowa DNR. I just got an email from this gentleman, and I will pass that on to, who should I pass it on to? Are you Chris?
I'm Chris.
Hi, Chris, I'm Darren. Nice to meet you, Darren Shea.
Yeah.
I will give that to you, and so he said for me to give, for you to contact him. We had a conversation, a long email as well. And he said, gave me the contact information from the Iowa DNR, and who your contact person is up there for the Indiana bat, any other bats.
Copy Jerry on that, because he's the one writing the ordinance.
Okay, well, the Iowa DNR needs to talk to the conservation officers down here. And he said for that information about your bat populations, and he'd like to have that as well. He doesn't have anything currently as to that, so that would be
Oh, so
really.
he wants our information.
He
on
wants your
that study.
information, yeah, so
Oh,
to
sure.
add to his study, yeah,
Okay.
so, and there can be supplemental information added. We need to get it done soon, so they can get that put into their database.
Yes.
So, thank you, okay, thank you.
Okay, so, and that kind of caveats on to where I was going there. So for 5A, prevention of collisions indoor electrocution, electrocution, okay, yeah. For avian and bat species through both physical location and design characteristics of the CBES infrastructure. Then I think we want to have a clause to include shutting off turbines at night. And I think we may be able to polish that language up a little bit more. But, so there's case law that just came down on this. There was a federal case which was brought by property owners where a developer in the county had not picked the least intrusive form to use for putting in, and it was specific with bats. I can't remember if it was the Indiana bat or not, but it was specific with bats where they were putting turbines in an area where they did have some endangered bats. And these people, so reading this case is a federal case, but because it was brought by landowners, so they had kind of a synopsis of each of these individual landowners and how they were affected or would be affected by these turbines in these areas. And what the federal courts came down and said was that they had, so they enjoined both the county and the developers, and they said that they needed to choose the least damaging to that endangered species, which meant that they needed to shut those turbines off at night. So I think that we want to include that in there. We already know we have, I believe, 2 different types of endangered bats. Three. So I think that if we just go ahead and explicitly put that in there, and then it's in the code already.
Can we also do the migratory time when they're migrating in from the south?
So that's,
I'm sorry, I'm just to add that to that.
so that, I already have that written down for 5B. I think that's something we should add. So for 5A, is that something you guys want?
Hi there, am I able to jump in, or when is the appropriate time to speak about this?
Well, putting up your hand's probably a good idea like that, since I didn't notice.
Okay, yeah, sorry, since I'm online, I can't tell what's going on in the room, but my name is Libby Ford, and I'm with AES. We're a wind developer working in the county, and we submitted a comment letter as part of this wildlife section of the ordinance. And I just wanted to jump in on explicitly shutting turbines off at night. So developers go through a pretty extensive process working with the Fish and Wildlife Service to determine what the appropriate mitigation or avoidance strategies are for bat species. So we prefer to stick with that process that they've laid out for us already, rather than jumping straight to turning turbines off at night. So we start with a presence-absence survey for bats. So we do 2 years of acoustic monitoring to determine which bat species are located on site. And we are well aware there's multiple endangered species in this area. So typically we work very closely with the Fish and Wildlife Service to come up with strategies to avoid those species as best as we can. And then part of that avoidance strategy is typically shutting turbines off and curtailing them at certain times. But a blanket strategy of shutting them off at night is actually not the most effective in helping the species. They have to be shut off during particular times like migration, so different months of the year depending on the species, and that's all coordination that is done with Fish and Wildlife Service very closely. So AES recommends that the recommendations in the ordinance do not get too specific on that, as each project is tailored differently depending on the species present, and we recommend that the ordinance should just reference working with Fish and Wildlife very closely to avoid and minimize impacts to endangered species to the extent possible. And if avoidance is not possible, then mitigation will be required by Fish and Wildlife. But most developers prefer to avoid, and the best way to do that is coordinating with Fish and Wildlife.
So our concern with that is Fish and Wildlife looks at this from a national perspective. So
I apologize. Fish and Wildlife, that's the national, that's a federal organization.
it is,
Okay,
yes.
okay.
And so when they have mitigation, it may very well be that they have mitigation, but it could be that they're moving the endangered species from Des Moines County, and they're saying, okay, we're gonna allow for more habitat, and it might not be in Des Moines County, it may be in Illinois, it may be in Missouri, it may be in Minnesota, who knows? And so I think from the perspective of Des Moines County, this protects us. Where the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, their standards are not, and their perspective is not what's in the best interest of the citizens of Des Moines County. And that's what this ordinance is really designed to protect. And that's why I think we should have this in there and not rely solely on U.S. Fish and Wildlife.
Yeah, I agree that it's important to protect at the county level as well. Fish and Wildlife Service does have regional offices, so they are specific to a region, and they prefer, if mitigation occurs, for it to be as close to the site as possible so that the type of habitat that is being mitigated for is very similar to the habitat on site. We also do work very closely with IDNR on identifying where that habitat would be located. Like I said, usually mitigation is our last resort. We prefer to avoid the species and minimize impacts as much as possible so that we don't have to even get to mitigation. But we work closely, and we will work closely with the conservation district through the county as well if mitigation is needed. So I think having those three agencies work together is the best approach, rather than having a blanket approach to curtailment, just so that each project can be addressed individually based on the specific impacts of that project.
I mean, if this is something you want to back off from in the future, you can. I mean, as always, if you want to give exceptions for specific reasons, but having exclusions in our ordinance protects us from the jump. It's a lot harder if we don't have them from the beginning. It's a lot harder to.
Add that later.
Yeah, yeah.
So Trent, what exactly are you proposing to?
Chris, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I was asking Trent what exactly he's proposing to add into it.
So I'm saying that we include shutting off the turbines, and I have down at night, and you might know better, I mean, I'm sure you do, you know, is it, you know, do the bats go out to feed, is it at, you know, is it at 5 o'clock, is it at 10 o'clock? I mean, it sounds like they go out in the evening, I don't know exactly. But when do they have to shut them down? I mean, there's probably a time frame within which these things need to be shut down in order to protect, one, the feeding, and two, you know, any mating rituals or whatever they may have.
So I don't know that a blanket shutdown policy is going to necessarily change anything. So going back, Chris Lee, I'm the conservation director, by the way, here in Des Moines County. So if we go back and in number 2, under B2 there, we do require documentation of consultation and or correspondence with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and or Des Moines County Conservation Board. So we're requiring that they consult with the 3 agencies. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has a rather robust pre-construction monitoring program. So ideally, through this, they're gonna do 2 years of monitoring, like she said, to determine whether there's presence of bats in these particular areas. And as I understand it, I believe they're gonna do a 2-mile radius around the proposed site. Is that correct, AES?
So typically for monitoring of bat species, we don't do up to 2 miles. We just do within the project area.
Okay, but then you'll do, so in that consultation with DNR, I got some correspondence from DNR as far as when DNR is contacted for correspondence regarding siting of wind turbines. They will take, so they've got map overlays, and they will look at known areas that have known bat populations on them, or have had documented presence of endangered species of bats. So in this instance, probably the closest one that is documented would be Big Hollow, which is only, I don't know what, a few miles away from some of these proposed sites. So DNR would look at that, and then they're going to then measure that within probably a 2-mile radius, because we know from scientific research that the foraging radius of Indiana bats is a 2-mile radius. So if I know I have a Big Hollow, we're gonna draw, they're going to come back and say this site is potentially within that 2-mile radius. We recommend moving it farther away or something like that. We also have in here, so we're requesting formal documentation, we're requesting the field studies, and then in number 3, as you brought up, demonstrable evidence that none of the components of these systems will have a direct or indirect negative impact. So Fish and Wildlife Service is going to issue a, basically a finding of impact. So if via these correspondence through Iowa DNR, through County Conservation, that information is going to come back to U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which is ultimately the agency that I believe these developers are going to be working with, and they're going to determine whether an impact is likely or not. If they determine that an impact likely is, that's when mitigation comes in. And so mitigation will be, it could be potentially a number of different things. One, mitigation could be recreating habitat elsewhere to replace habitat that's being impacted by site construction, or it could be operational mitigation, such as shutting down at night or something like that. So one of the recommendations, so I sent in an email that had a number of recommendations in it, and one of those was, so in recommendation 3 in that email I had sent to Jared, was, so the operator shall submit an annual wildlife monitoring report. So you've got the pre-construction monitoring to determine any impacts that you're likely to have. So assuming we get past that point, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service says, all right, the impacts are going to be likely minimal. We recommend authorizing siting at this particular spot. That's again gonna be in consultation with your local entity, which would be us, Iowa DNR. So we get past that, we get into construction. Then we're going to have a post-construction monitoring program that once these things are built, there's going to be an obligation for the developer, for the operator, to then measure any impacts. And that, I believe, is a requirement by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, so they're not in their heads yes. So there's going to be post-construction bird and bat mortality monitoring. So there are companies, so what I would assume would happen is either they'll have on-staff folks or they will subcontract out a company whose job is to come in and measure mortality. So literally what they do is they walk around these areas, they're looking for carcasses, they're looking for mortality of birds and bats and things like that. What I wanted to have was, it's one thing to say you're going to do this monitoring and then just trust that they do it. It's something else to actually get a report that says, we didn't find anything. To go out and look, here's the companies that we use, here's the protocol, and look, here's the companies that we use, here's the protocols that they followed. That was one of the things that I wanted to see, rather than, yeah, we did it, don't ask any more questions. As to what U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service requires, they may require that annual report anyway. Regardless, I would want to make sure that we as a county get to see that. And that way, we know what's being done to go out there and assess that mortality or assess any impacts once these things are then constructed. And then, once we have that, I would want to see, and I believe this is...
Chris, I like that idea, but would we have an opportunity to either A, have somebody that goes along with, or B, have a say in who does those checks?
That would be in your pre-construction consultations, so yes. So the county's gonna be provided a, let's see which section it was. So in section C, review and approval plan. So the developer is going to submit a wildlife monitoring and mitigation plan. That plan will be reviewed and formally approved by Des Moines County Conservation Board prior to the approval and siting permit. So before the county says your siting permit is approved, the County Conservation Board, and then we will do that in consultation with the Iowa DNR and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, because they're gonna be reviewing that anyway. But if we have any issues with what's in there as far as how they're planning on doing their monitoring and mitigation, we will then have the opportunity to bring that up at that time before the siting plan, or before the site approval is even made by the county. So that's already in there.
I'm interested,
So then,
listening.
so then once they get into post-construction monitoring, one of my recommendations was, so we get these reports, these annual reports, or quarterly reports, however they're provided. They'll include the methods used, the survey effort, the raw data, the analysis of mortality rates. If we're finding that mortality rates are above what we would expect, and this would be in consultation again with Iowa DNR, with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, at that juncture, that triggers their corrective actions. And so this would include, but not be limited to, curtailment of turbine operations during low wind. So if you've got low wind events when things are migrating through, and at peak migration periods, which would be like April and May, and then August through October. It could include deployment of deterrent technologies or operational adjustments or temporary or seasonal shutdowns until mortality rates are reduced. So in this instance, if we're finding dead bats pretty repeatedly, one of the operational mitigation measures may be shut these things down during that evening or nighttime times when bats are out foraging. Or maybe during migration times when bird or bats are migrating through here, if we're finding seasonal increases in mortality. And then annual reports and associated mitigation plans would be submitted and be made publicly available, so they're scrutinized. I believe, Jared, I don't have that email up, but I believe they submitted some responses to my recommendations. But if AES has anything to add now, would probably be a good time to rebut.
Roy, did you have something back there?
Well, number one, just most recently, I thought this wasn't about one company, so it really doesn't matter what AES says at this point. But my comment is, there was a similar project that tried to be developed in 2010, and it ended in 2012. And again, a different project was started in 2014, and it ended in 2016. The landowners I spoke to said those projects ceased, abandoned, because of the birds and bat issue. So what has changed? We're still here, it's still the same county.
I'm not familiar with what caused, I knew that there were people out, but I'm not familiar at all with why those projects weren't pursued.
Okay, that information came directly from landowners who had signed up previously, who did not sign up this time. But
And that's fine, I'm not saying that, I'm just saying I don't know why those
okay, I'm
projects
just trying to
were not
point out
pursued.
that the
or-
birds and the
or whatever.
bats are really an issue in this area of the county. It's a major thoroughfare.
And it could turn out to be that during their pre-construction monitoring, they may find out that this site is not feasible. We're just trying to develop a policy right now that ensures that the obligations that we're gonna hold any developer to, whether it's AES or anyone else, is consistent, and meets the level of scrutiny that we would like to see. Largely, we're gonna defer to U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. But we wanna make sure that there's consultation, and what my concern was, is I wanna make sure we're provided the documentation so that we know how this monitoring, is being done, and then we have a say, you know, because as was mentioned earlier, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is a federal agency. They might not have their thumb on the pulse of particular populations here locally, and so this builds in language that forces that consultation with local entities, which would include county conservation and Iowa DNR.
Cindy?
Cindy Newberry. I recently spoke to a supervisor in Knox County, Nebraska, that's going through the same stuff, and they've been going through this for years. Anyway, he was telling me about a person he knows from their experience that goes and checks this, and his number one job was to carry a shovel. Also, that landowners have shovels. So, you know, this all sounds good, but how do you monitor something that, you know, if I have one in my, if I've leased land and I have one, I'm gonna go check that every day and bury what's killed. I mean, this sounds good, but how do you really monitor it? That's what the other supervisors, I mean.
Or if it just get disked under when somebody's just planting the corn, because that's what you gotta do. Regardless, I think, what's the point of this section if all we're gonna do is follow the U.S. Fish and Wildlife minimum standard, which doesn't particularly protect the county? Again, they have national interest, not county interest. I think if we put language in there specifically to mitigate within our code section, then we have it there. And if for some reason, after we go through the process, the supervisors want to back off from that, you always have that option. But if we just defer to U.S. Fish and Wildlife from the jump, then we've essentially given away all of our leverage.
It's important.
Go ahead.
I just want, Jared Laster, County Land Use, I just want to acknowledge that we're not specifically deferring entirely to U.S. Fish and Wildlife, but it's the combination of conservation entities at the local, state, and federal level. So county conservation, Iowa DNR, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. So it's basing off of the combined resources of those three different agencies at multiple levels of government, and the knowledge base at each regarding whatever conservation principles are relevant in each particular case. So the concern being that if we impose specific standards that that apply in every situation, it's not something that, it may not be applicable in all individual situations where a wind or a solar facility is developed. So we need to be careful that we're deferring to those agencies to have the appropriate requirements instituted in each case without having a blanket requirement at the county level that's inflexible and must be followed in every case, whether the studies show that it's applicable or not. Just want to put that out there.
I mean, you're right, you say that, but we also just read off the administrative process for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service compliance. So, you know.
I have a question, Darren from Minneapolis. Since we're looking at this national work plan through the U.S. Wildlife Service, it's their 5-year review for this endangered species, since they only have 13 Indiana bats on there specifically. Finishing at the end of this calendar year, they're gonna have that report. And basically need the information from Iowa, so we get that forward to them about the Indiana bat. Shouldn't we maybe wait to get that in, so we're not leaving ourselves open legally to know what that report is for the bat populations after doing this study, this 5-year review study that is required by the Federal Registry and by the federal government? It includes, we're on that list in Iowa, so should we be waiting for that? I mean, I'm just to keep ourselves, so we're not opening ourselves up to that.
I don't think we can wait on federal studies, there's always federal studies.
Well,
going on.
they named this specifically, 1 out of 13.
I know, I understand that.
That's all I'm saying.
I understand
I just don't
that.
wanna leave us open, are you guys open to any legal
I appreciate that.
ramifications?
Yeah, I can't, Tom's right, I can't say that.
Okay,
That,
that's
I
my
mean,
question.
there may be something that comes out later, but there's always studies out there.
Well, this was
So-
specific to us, that's why in this situation with Chris at the
Chris-
conservation.
Chris, and you'll know better, you've dealt with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and Iowa DNR. Did they listen to, if they say there's gonna be a consultation, do they actually pay any attention to you or IDNR?
Yeah, so the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, their obligation is to protect the species. So their obligation is not to developers or anything like that. So their obligation is to uphold the Endangered Species Act and to really understand a project's impact on endangered species. So yes, they are going to, and we do have a regional field office, which is right up at Lake Odessa. There's a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Field Office, so it's whatever, a mile from the DNR Wildlife Office. And I know the folks up there by name. So yeah, they will reach out and they are going to look for that local.
You will actually have input.
Yes.
That they'll listen to.
Yeah. Yeah, which is, I mean, just like this report that she brought up, they're going to reach out to us to see if there's, to see that, the data that we have, because we've been studying bats for a decade now. And so we have some pretty robust data on bats and where we have found them in the county and what habitats they use over others. And so, yeah, they will certainly use that. And within their, so I think in one of my recommendations, the survey methodology shall follow U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service wind energy guidelines, tier 2 to 3 protocols. So if you look at those tiered protocols, within those, they have built in required consultation with local entities. So there is required consultation with Iowa DNR, and then with local county conservation. Iowa's unique in that we have a local county conservation system. No other state really has that. But that's built right into their protocols.
Thank you.
Chris, when does the, I know when they were doing some road work down here, they couldn't cut trees down a certain time of year and that. Is that because of the bats? Would that have anything to do when the bats are out and they're around?
Yep. So, with the exception of Stars Cave, the cave itself, Des Moines County isn't necessarily a wintering spot, although the cave is a known hibernacula. We're a a summer breeding location. So what will happen is we'll get these colonies of Indiana bats, and they roost in loose bark of trees. And so you'll get these maternity colonies, so it'll be a bunch of mothers nursing their young, and then they'll go out in the evenings and they'll feed, and then they'll come back and they'll feed their young. So the reason that they put that tree requirement on there is, I think, April to October, there's a good chance that those maternity colonies have established those areas, and you won't even know they're there. I mean, they're itty bitty tiny little things, and they'll, like on a shagbark hickory, they'll just get up underneath that loose bark. And what we learned from our consultations when we were doing the pre and post construction studies for Big Hollow Lake is that you cut, one tree or a group of trees down, that could be, you could eliminate the habitat, the maternity roost for an entire colony of bats, and that might be the only colony of bats you have. And so if you take that down, you've wiped them out, and that could be devastating to a local population. And when you're looking at a species of bat that is on its decline, as bad as, say, Indiana bats are or northern long-eared are, that could be populationally devastating.
Are they like salmon? Do they return to where they were born? I mean, that's a stupid question. You get what I mean.
I don't have the answer to that. I think you'll often have bats come back to the same areas, but I don't know that it's gonna be like the same tree, the way, some, like wood ducks, they'll come back to the same tree they were hatched in.
Really?
Oh yeah, and geese, they will come back to you'll see those fake nesting structures, they'll come back to those very same ones. Mallard ducks do the same thing, so a lot of birds will do that. I don't know that bats do. They do return to the same wintering habitats over and over and over and over. I don't know about maternity colonies though.
Can I say real quick? They have one pup a year, a bat. So to replenish, since they're down almost 90%, it can take 200-300 years to redo our bat population because of this white nose fungus. Am I correct on that? About the white nose, yeah.
And that habitat loss.
And the habitat loss, yeah. So one pup a year per bat. That's why it's so devastating if we lose one tree, like he's saying, they get underneath the bark. And the Indiana bat's the size of what, a credit card? Or not even that, a business card. They're so tiny. Yeah. I'm sorry, I did interrupt it.
Well, now I know what baby bat's called.
What's that?
Now I know what a baby bat's called, so thank you for that.
They don't winter here then, right?
Not, so they won't winter out like on trees and stuff, no. Now, we do have wintering colonies so we do have overwintering bats in Starr's Cave. The
And
cave
do
itself.
they feed, do they go out and feed at night then too?
In the winter?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
With the exception of, so this is what's wiping out populations, is this white nose syndrome, and we have determined that we have found it in Starr's Cave. So with white nose syndrome, what will happen is they will get that fungus and it'll wake them up from their hibernation, and they wake up, so this will be the middle of winter, they'll wake up super hungry. Been sleeping a long time. So they will take off to go out to forage, but it's winter, so there's nothing to forage on, and they'll either starve or freeze to death. And so that's one of the things that's really been wiping out populations.
What I was getting at on that, then you could shut them down, like when you're blanket thing, but not during that winter time.
I'm not against a shutdown clause, and I think there will be instances where that likely comes in. I think in the interest of balancing operations against ecological impact, that is measured against data. And so if we're finding that there is an impact, then yes, there's some justification, and that would be written into their mitigation plan, their wildlife monitoring mitigation plan that we would approve ahead.
I like that you're involved, that the IDNR and the local conservation be involved.
Yes.
Yeah, I would just quickly like to add that any wind project that's located within 10 miles of a known location that these bats hibernate, it is already determined that is going to be an impact on the species and mitigation is required. So almost every project, because of that, ensures that the turbines are more than 10 miles away from these known hibernacula.
Did you have something?
Yes, I was,
Name?
Rose Fisher, sorry. I had just received, after the meeting started this morning, a copy of an environmental review for natural resources from the Iowa DNR, and I'm just wondering if that's something Chris had when he was coming up with his comments, if that's something that SERPC has.
So what is this specifically?
Environmental review for what?
It's
For
an
what?
environmental review for natural resources. It was dated July of '24, it's from the Iowa DNR, and it just made comments about the proposed development of the wind turbines here.
Can you read it? Or give it to Chris to read so he can.
Yeah, you can.
I don't want to.
Email that to me.
Yeah.
So a couple of the comments was, the department strongly recommends that turbines are sited a minimum of 1 mile from any state or county-owned areas or complexes. The department strongly urges the developer to consider sites for these turbines beyond a 1 mile buffer. Although the department does not regulate wind farms, there are concerns regarding potential adverse impacts to bird and bat populations associated with wind farms beyond mortality associated with turbine collisions.
So this isn't a specific environmental review, this is, I'm guessing the DNR's,
This is.
their standing policy recommendation, which that I do have.
Yeah.
Well, this was addressed to Kate McEwen of Western Ecosystems Technology, Inc. in Cheyenne, Wyoming. So it was a specific request to the Iowa DNR for an environmental review regarding a proposed wind development, and this was their response to this specific development.
Yeah, which is probably going to follow the same recommendations that DNR is going to have for home call, with the exception of some unique areas within the state, which would be like the Los Hills ecoregion, or specific established bird conservation areas. So they're going to, the DNR is always going to recommend that public lands be buffered by at least a mile. If there's a 2,000 plus acre public land complex, they would recommend a buffer of at least 2 miles. Known bald eagle nest sites with activity unknown buffered by at least 3 miles. Known active bald eagle nest sites buffered at least 5 miles. And then any tracts of grassland that are over 40 acres, any forested or wetlands that are over 40 plus acres, they're gonna ask for a half a mile buffer. The DNR does not have regulations against, the state does not actually have any regulations on that, any standing written code regulations. But as part of this consultation process, these would be the recommendations that DNR will bring forth, in addition to anything specific to a particular site. So, you know, known areas of threatened or endangered species, that's going to dictate additional recommendations for a particular site. But as far as blanket recommendation goes for anything in the state, that's what's going to follow. And I do have that. And I'm sure any developer has probably seen or is aware of that too.
Brad Coates, I just want to, so known active bald eagle nest 5 miles.
5 miles. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, AES, I believe that's a federal recommendation as well.
No, so the federal regulations say 660 feet from known active bald eagle nests. Anything outside of that is not anticipated to have an impact on the nesting activity. And then for golden eagles, it's a 2 mile buffer around nests. Anything outside of that will not have impacts, according to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Which again, Brad, I think that's the point, to Chris's point of, hey, we need, you know, we need local, we need state, we need federal, that's all great. All those have to look at it. And that's kind of where Trent's at, saying, well, our local, you know, because federal might go, well, you know, okay, 600 feet, we'll build a net, you know, where I can walk you to a nest that's a mile from my house.
Yeah.
And my house is 700 feet from the proposed site. So
you know? And we have bald eagles, I mean, I'm on Flint Creek. We have bald eagles up and down Flint Creek. Every day I go along the creek, I'll bust a bald eagle out. So it's a interesting number, but it shows again the disparity between federal and local, even state.
And state.
And so that, they're in, so in B2 here, the county's going to require documentation of consultation and correspondence with the Iowa DNR, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and Des Moines County Conservation.
Well, it's and or. I would remove the or out of there. The and ors are killers.
Be a good one.
But it should be an and.
I agree with that.
I agree with you on that too.
Chris?
Yeah, Kelly Pool one.
But he said he has not no information.
Have him.
You have a question in the chat.
What's that?
You have a question in the chat from the Des Moines County News.
Oh,
So Lori Cochran asked, what's an acceptable mortality rate?
Yeah.
On what
I,
species?
I don't know. I would yield to anybody in the, from AES know the answer to that, what an acceptable mortality rate is?
So those are set by species. Different species have different acceptable mortality rates based on the level of their population numbers and the health of their population at a given time. And so that is all outlined in the post-construction monitoring report and the pre-construction we do before the project is in operations. We do calculations of what we predict potential mortality to be, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife will review that report and sign off on it on whether or not they believe that is acceptable. And then during the post-construction monitoring, we have reports that prove whether or not we are aligned with the predicted mortality rates. And that is, the rates are all set by Fish and Wildlife Service and get sign off from IDNR depending on if the species is listed at the state level or at the federal level.
Thank you.
And so again, that would come back to section C there, the review and approval plan. So that wildlife monitoring mitigation plan shall be reviewed and formally approved by Des Moines County Conservation Board prior to the approval of the siting permit. So before the county will even approve the siting permit, we have to be able to see that plan and review it.
So, yeah, and you keep saying siting permit, but we've got to talk, we've got to get to that. We're not there yet, but yeah. Cindy?
Cindy DeBerry, the way I understand it, they are allowed to buy eagle permits, that they can kill X amount of eagles. What? A tape, yeah, it's called a tape permit, thank you. Which, okay, for instance, how much is the fine if you have a bald eagle feather? $5,000. If you go pick up an eagle feather, it's a $5,000 fine. But yet they're allowed to buy tape permits, and then even if that was okay, which it's not in my opinion, how do you ever prove how many they actually kill?
Exactly.
Once again, get the shovel out. Why is that even legal, that you can do that?
So I can comment briefly on the take permitting. So as part of an eagle take permit, a developer is required to buy mitigation credits that help with the reestablishment of eagle habitat. So we previously have had the opportunity to do mitigation ourselves and buy habitat, but this is how Fish and Wildlife has set it up because they prefer biologists to take the money and find that habitat. And so it's hundreds of thousands of dollars per year for those permits that are going to the restoration of eagle habitat. And then as part of the post-construction monitoring, if any eagle carcasses are identified, That immediately requires notification to Fish and Wildlife Service because those species are protected under the Bald and Golden Eagle Act. And we do close coordination with them on whether or not an eagle take permit is required. Typically, these projects will go for an eagle take permit because of the presence of eagles, especially in Iowa. So we work very closely with them on mortalities and reporting those mortalities immediately. Otherwise, we'll be in violation of that federal law.
Cindy Dewberry, just so you know, all the way around me is leased, and I have eagles in my pond. I have pictures of eagles at my pond. I have pictures of eagles by Yarmouth, along the highway. So, yeah, I'll miss them.
I have a question about the Indiana bat. I'm going back to that because they're so endangered.
Name?
Darren Shade, I'm sorry, from Minneapolis. And Chris can talk more to this. Since we know, I was looking at the history right now, is given from U.S. Fish and Wildlife from Andrew King about, he gave me a link, which I'm gonna give to Chris, about across what's happening in this last year. Cumulative with the Indiana bat, like in New York, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, they're 99% down, they're almost extinct. We are luckily here, Illinois has gained 1%. Iowa's still not reported yet, which we will get that to them. But the average is probably about 80–85%. So we only have a population a little over 400,000 now in the United States. Right here, I don't know our population. Do you have any idea, Chris, where we're at? Any kind of thought? Even one is devastating to this. So even one take permit should not be allowed. I mean, this is something that we're losing. The northern long-eared bats now in the federal endangered species. Is it the gray bat, the other one? Is it the gray bat? Or even talking about the brown bat now. Tricolor, is that what it is? Okay.
That one's brand new.
Yeah, it's brand new. They've added 2 new brand new bats to it that we have here locally. So to me, the bats help agriculture billions of dollars a year, but because of their feeding lots, their habitat, the white nose syndrome, and plus wind turbines all combined, one is too many. That's my question to you, when we look at that. I don't wanna look at a project from a wind company or solar company or any of these companies, because they're gonna be biased. Who are we gonna get an unbiased person to go out and look at this? Who would do that? The conservation, would it be the board?
The one thing that did interest me a little bit that Chris said, not, I mean, the only thing, I like all your ideas were, I have 2 questions, but to your question, you'd mentioned that, so a developer might either go out, send their own personnel out, might have their own team that goes out and does that, or there would be private contractors that would do that. Would it be advantageous, or would it be in our interest to require a certain contractor or a certain or a group of contractors or something like that? Maybe I'm stepping over the legal line here, I see.
No, that's what I was saying. I think that we should write in there language that we have a say, if we're doing, say, as far as in the initial study, we should have a say in who does the initial study prior to the submission of a permit. And then second, we should have a say if they're gonna do, as Chris wants, annual reports, say every other year. It's still funded, they still have to pay, but every other year, it's by a company of our choosing. So that way we have a say in who's going out and who's studying. And there are companies that do this. We see companies that go out and do this sort of work in other areas. Not a lot.
And you wouldn't want to just say, you have to use ABC bird counters. You know what I mean? That's an ugly idea. But a certain group, or maybe you could list 7, but anyway, so we have some input in who's doing that. And then all this would have, I think it was Mr. Coates that said, where, you could go to the local, the state, or the federal, and just put, you have to go to all of them, because I I would be comfortable if we had, more comfortable with the state, but I would be a lot more comfortable if it was the, our local conservation office.
Especially yours out of there, Gary.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, our,
Makes sense.
was getting input on mitigation efforts and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I don't know if there necessarily be any issues with requiring a third-party monitoring. I don't know if there's precedent or, you know, I'd ask AES how maybe you guys do it, but broadly, within the wind industry, is it common practice that they use a third-party firm to do their monitoring, or do most of them or a lot of them do that in-house? How's that usually done?
It's almost all entirely third party, because the Fish and Wildlife Service does prefer that unbiased third party biological company to work with us.
And that's all we want, is an unbiased, independent group of people that said no birds were killed, or 50, whatever it might be. And to Darren, and I'm not saying bad aren't important, one bad isn't important, but this sort of gotten over the years sort of a bad reputation. All sorts of things they're trying to build. We found some minnow here, or some snails here, or something like that, and they shut down something that's and I think this matters. I'm not saying it's that, but I'm just saying that.
I guess the difference is, for me, is this is an ecosystem here.
Well,
It's not one of it, this is a major ecosystem, and there's a fine balance.
Name?
Yeah, Darren Shade from Minneapolis.
It was my fault, I asked her.
No, yeah,
Oh.
he did, that's fine. And that's where, and I understand what you're saying about snail, but this is a complete ecosystem. Yeah.
No,
As you know,
I'm just saying, but,
that's why I'm so concerned,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Rose Fisher. It's not just a snail or a minnow, because the bats are directly related to agriculture, which is what we are. I mean, so it's not a minnow, it's not a snail.
Okay.
Okay, trying to think with the county attorney's office. So, we were on 5A, so I had mentioned this to include shutting off turbines at night. What I'm gathering from Chris is, you'd like some shut-off language, but you want that worked into, so.
The monitoring and mitigation plan.
Into the monitoring and mitigation.
I mean, these, Jared Lassiter, regional plan, or land use, so this specifically, that section 5 highlights examples of things that could be done potentially to address the mitigation, so that could be cited as an additional example as opposed to this as an arbitrary requirement. It's just giving the reader an idea of what this could potentially entail in terms of the requirements through the conservation agencies.
Zach James has these other playing, but I think what we're trying to avoid is like a specific thing that says, you're just a blanket, you're gonna shut these down at these times. I think it's more, we're gonna defer to our local, state, and federal agencies to give us the guidance on what whatever the mitigation measures may be, and we're gonna require to follow those things based on their expertise, so.
Well,
I think that's the key, is we don't wanna have some really strict policy which we've talked about before, some kind of, I guess the term was poison pill thing, that's just like, it eliminates the ability to do any type of development, but defer to our experts in the field, local, state, federal, and let them give us the guidance on what mitigation measures we should follow, so.
Right.
I think, and that's what I think I get from Chris and from you guys, I think, is what I'd be interested in.
Rose Fisher. So if we already know that Des Moines County is a major migratory bird path, why would we not put something in up front? Because we already know, why would we wait until it happened?
that's part of the pre-construction monitoring. So it's in there. It's required in here. So one of the lines in here is, under pre-construction, they've got to document existing wildlife conditions and they're gonna be doing monitoring. And this is why we're adamant about requiring that local consultation, is so that we're not just counting on a federal agency to say, well, you know, yeah, monitor for bats, but don't worry about anything else. By consulting with the local entities, I would know, if they come to county conservation, I'm gonna say, I know that Flint Creek corridor is critical bat habitat because we have the acoustic monitoring data to show that. I also know that we've got eagles all over the county. And, you know, that's where it's gonna show up on a conservation board meeting agenda to review their pre-monitoring plan. At that juncture, that's where somebody like Brad should show up and say, I've got an eagle nest 100 yards from my house, which is, you know, a quarter mile from this potential site. So requiring that local consultation, and then that way we can come back and say to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, here's the things that we think need to be monitored for as well. And so then through that monitoring, that's gonna be 2 years of monitoring. So it's not just going to capture one particular season, it's going to capture the migration season as well through 2 years. So ideally, you're going to, I would have liked to have seen it 3, but it may be that they require more than that if they figure out that there is something that needs the longer requirement. But either way, you're going to buffer any 1-year anomaly by doing that. And so then, based on that data, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service may look at that and say, this is a critical migration corridor, this isn't really going to work, or here's the mitigation strategies that you're going to have to put in place in order to make this work. And they may find that it's just cost prohibitive. Or they may find that there's mitigation strategies that can then make it work. But you can't just say, we're a critical migration area. We've got to collect the data and base it off of that. Yeah, we know we're a critical migration area. I mean, we're right along the Mississippi River. You know, I mean, every county along the Mississippi River is a critical migration area. But let's gather the data to prove it, and then use that to then make decisions on whether this is going to be a feasible site or not. And that's where we defer to agencies that actually have regulatory authority.
Chris, this is what they're saying, is you just said, yes, we already know it. So if we already have the data and we already know it, then why don't we put it in the ordinance?
I agree.
So how would you word it?
So, moving on, can I move on to the next section?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, 5B, avoidance of developing within or in close proximity to any especially sensitive environmental sites on private land within a proposed project, area including documented habitat for endangered species or migratory birds, to include shutting off turbines during migration periods. So it's that simple. If we know we're in a migration corridor, and I don't know exactly when these migration periods are, but I tell you, I drive down Highway 34 every day, and there's about 2 or 3 days out of the year that pond just to the, and it's at a curve, so I don't know if it's to the south or, what's that? Yes, that, there's 2 or 3 days out of the year that you can't see the water because there's so many ducks, geese, so many birds on it. And so if there's turbines by that, they need to be shut off for those 2 or 3 days throughout the year. And we need to be able to figure out what that is if we're gonna be able to do this and do it safely and protect these things.
Darren Shade from Minneapolis, I gave the board every day, remember I gave it to you the last time I was here, of the migration, we had one day of 8 million in one night. And there's lights out, you go to Burkcast with the Audubon Society, they give you the high migration days, and they tell you, they'll give you the dates, but I gave them every day of the migration that came over Des Moines County, so that might help you. They have that information. So you would have that every day. So that would help to know the periods. and Chris knows that, what is that? Is it August to November? And then March to,
Well, I mean, it's,
what's the
it,
dates?
it depends on what you're talking about. So if you're talking about waterfowl, we're talking about November is gonna be peak migration. But if we're talking about bats, we're probably talking August, September, October at the latest. So are we gonna shut them down from August to, and it might not, and for waterfowl, it might not even be November. I mean, any duck hunter will tell you, sometimes peak migration hits at the first part of November, sometimes, I mean, we've had a lot of duck hunters that are petitioning the DNR to extend the duck season almost to the first of the year because our falls are staying warmer longer and it's delaying that migration. So to just say we're gonna shut it down during migrations without knowing when that is, I mean, you might as well just shut it down. And so, I mean, and sure, fine, shut them down. But I feel as a public entity, we're trying to strike a balance here between allowing some sort of green energy development within our county and also mitigating potential ecological impacts. And so, yes, everything is going to be a balance. I just don't know how to put in, I'm not against, putting some sort of shutdown clause in there, but I think that maybe could be better identified in the monitoring and mitigation plan versus a blanket statement of shut it down during migration, because the migration is gonna be different for a lot of different things.
And I do, if I understand it correctly, so that monitoring and mitigation plan would be designed between a developer and you, the DNR, and that would be turned in before a permit could be issued and agreed upon by everybody, what kind of mitigation efforts, might be required or are required, and then it gets reviewed, I assume, annually every 2 years, something like that.
So,
And if we have an operating permit, like you mentioned last time, that, their actual use of that mitigation program or the, that would be one of the things you look at.
And I hate to say this, but as Elizabeth mentioned earlier, that's going to include, mortality assessments. And so for different species, there's going to be thresholds that can't be exceeded, and if they are, that's where operational mitigation things come in, where, okay, maybe we do have to shut this down for right now because, and so the mortality threshold for, say, European starlings is going to be significantly different than, say, for an Indiana bat. This third-party monitoring company is gonna be out there looking at the dead things flying off of these turbine blades is going to have a very lower threshold. If they find one dead bat in there, that's going to be, or, an eagle, that's going to be an immediate, we gotta address this thing. We find some starlings out there, I mean, those are the things that blacken the sky.
They can have one.
Right, exactly. That's a very, very different thing, and it is gonna be based on population stuff.
I think
The reality is, you're just not gonna know.
Allison Moore, Yarmouth. So are you talking about every single turbine needs to have its own study?
Well, it'll be the site.
Well, did we decide? Are we having siting permits per turbine? Are you gonna do a study on every single turbine? Because they're going to be miles and miles apart.
So, again, I cannot say this enough. We are not talking about doing siting permits. A siting permit is essentially like zoning. So it'd be like zoning an entire area. So say if somebody went to the southern portion of Des Moines County and said they wanted a siting permit for everything south of Burlington to put in solar panels. And then it would be like rezoning that from, most of that's residential, from residential to industrial for people to put in a solar farm. And then they can put in solar so long as it meets the minimum standards put in by whatever ordinance we have adopted regardless of what the supervisors wanted to do. That is not our recommendation, that we use a citing permit for anything. So we're not talking in the language of
So
citing
what
permits.
What is it you're gonna review every 3 years?
So we're talking about having a permit, and then we're talking about having a renewal permit every 3 years.
Okay.
So-
Because you're citing outside the 2-mile zone, the rest of the county is zoned anyway.
Right. So when they're talking the citing permit, they're talking about like a preliminary permit, like this preliminary citing permit. And we just don't wanna do that. We wanna have one permit.
That would
If
be
they're
the-
doing one permit.
That's
and-
not what we're talking about.
We're talking about a
but-
conditional,
Okay.
and then, was it the conditional and then the final?
Basically, the idea is, somebody's coming in to place a solar farm, a wind farm, a battery storage system, and there has to be a permit that outlines
Blanket
the
permit.
encompass of where this thing is going. You can call it whatever you want, but it's just a permit of where this thing is gonna go, and here are all the requirements that go with it.
Well, my
And-
question
You could call it
was-
something else, but
And-
it's,
But my
the contract.
question is, will the study be per
it would be
turbine
for the
placement?
entire project, which would include the placement of all of the turbines.
So that conditional permit, that would include
It's saying it was
Chris's.
the
It could
last,
be-
because you're talking preliminary in this thing.
But
Okay, yeah, all right, it works. Okay, so,
Yeah. Back
Still
there,
talking. Cindy Newberry, 2 things. The guy that was sitting right here is Terry Davis, and he's on the conservation board, and he knew none of this was going on. So that, you mentioned them, so I thought I'd let you know that he just found out from Darren that this was even going on. So they kind of probably need to be in the mix. Second of all, I printed out this map. This map shows every single turbine in the state of Iowa, clear down to the little one down here in New London. And if you follow the river, there are 10. There are, like, these are tiny. I have them on this map, even how big they are. The site tells you how tall they are. So they're both rivers. These are just like little farm turbines, but they show up on the map because that's what they are. So I have a copy of this for all of you to look at. But this is a big indicator. There's 2 reasons for this. I'm sure the migration and the level. That's why they have to put 750 footers here. These are 396, 328, 492, and these are not even close to the river. So I'll give you all this map afterwards. And you need to talk to.
go ahead, Trent.
so, and then we have C, an increase in distance between the minimum required setback, component C west, C cess, C best, public conservation area, specific ecological conditions of that.
And I apologize, Trent, which paragraph are you on?
5C.
Okay, thank you.
Have specific ecological conditions of that conservation area justify a greater distance. I think for that, we just say to include, a 2-mile setback. Just to include a 2-mile setback from the Roost and Indiana Bat. But I also think, when we're talking any conservation area, if we really talk about that, I think we add in, first of all, the DNR recommendation is at 2 miles from the public conservation areas.
So any public lands is gonna be, their recommendation will be buffered 1 mile. Now,
1 mile.
these are just their standard response. Again, this is gonna come back to, it's going to be site specific. So like with Big Hollow, since we know there's Indiana bats on that one, the recommendation would be significantly more than
Okay.
that.
So.
So that's gonna vary from site to site and place to place.
Okay. So do we want to keep that language as is then, to increase distance beyond minimum required setback?
Yeah, that's
Okay. And then as we get into E and F, that's good. I have a G, that there shall be 1 mile setback for CBES, CSES, BES, all of that. Within 1 mile of federal, state, or locally funded conservation areas to include but not limited to CRP, government-funded wetlands, public conservations, and public conservation areas. And the thought process being, if we're spending taxpayer dollars to build these conservation areas, whether it be on publicly owned land or privately owned land, I think we ought to give it the same setback, simply because why are we gonna pay somebody for this conservation in one respect and then put this environmental hazard right on top of it at the same time? So I have that G in there. One, it adopts that DNR recommendation. And then two, it also adds for, anytime we have somebody, whether it's CRP, whether it's wetlands, because we have those within the area.
Hey Trent, Brian Carter.
Yeah.
When you say CRP, are you talking about just anything a farmer puts into a program?
Yeah.
Okay, so those are mostly for pheasant, quail, deer. You're gonna take environmental habitat out because they're gonna buy that out, so they can put a windmill up. You're gonna lose habitat because of that idea.
Those are only temporary contracts. Those aren't permanent
Yeah.
protections.
You're gonna
Unless
lose
it's
it.
an easement.
So you're getting rid of habitat when we're talking about saving it.
So you wanna take CRP out of that?
I would recommend it,
Okay.
because I'd buy it out if I was looking at $30,000 for a windmill.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because you don't make much money off them anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, you're lucky if it matches cash rank.
Okay.
So, and the animals that are in those will never be killed
Won't be affected?
by a turbine blade because they don't fly that high. I mean, pheasants don't get to that altitude, majority of the time,
They come
quail, that kind of stuff.
75 feet from the ground, how high does it go?
Well, they're not gonna be flying 75 foot very often.
I didn't know, I mean, I'm not.
I can't tell you, but I won't.
My husband is, but.
For the most part, they won't be a problem.
Turkeys
I
fly
just,
as a controlled.
you don't wanna lose that habitat, there already isn't enough of it.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Okay, and then based on the information from today, do we also want to add no wind turbines within 5 miles of an established bald eagle habitat?
Whose recommendation is that?
It's the D, I got it on the
DNR, on the DNR.
Trent.
Chris, have you got any thoughts on that?
It's right here.
That's a different
Got
one.
it better.
I think.
I'm not an expert on that one, so again, I'm gonna defer to the DNR. I mean, their recommendation is gonna be, a known active bald eagle nest, they're gonna recommend a buffer of 5 miles. And I assume that's probably due to a foraging radius of what we know eagles will travel to forage.
So they will, but short of a taking permit, right? So is that something that we want to allow for? Because again, that gives a benefit to, the US Fish and Wildlife Service, but it doesn't benefit the county. So if they want to put one within a 5 mile radius and they purchase a takings permit, that's funding that's going to US Fish and Wildlife Service to put in habitat for eagles' nests someplace else, but not necessarily in Des Moines County.
That's a good point. Think about that.
My only rebuttal, yeah, I like where you're going with that. My only rebuttal to it is, I don't think we want to get into the game of requiring our own mitigation. And what my fear would happen here is, so US Fish and Wildlife Service is already gonna have a mitigation requirement. So if they know that a proposed wind turbine development or any sort of development is gonna be within, distance of, an eagle nest. Now, as we were told, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is only concerned about 700 and something feet. But via consultation with DNR and us, we say, look, we know there's eagle nests around here, we've got documentation that they're traveling this far, requires some mitigation. That system already exists. What I don't think we want to get in the business, or frankly, I know my department doesn't want to get in the business of doing, is trying to require mitigation and going through all the bureaucracy that's going to follow with that. What my fear here is if we put a thing in that says there will be no turbines built within 5 miles of an eagle nest, and let's say Brad's got an eagle's nest 100 yards from his house down along the creek, but he also owns a parcel of land that a developer's coming in and offering him large dollars to put a turbine on, and he knows that that's gonna be inside that radius. What's gonna prevent him from going cut down that tree? Because there's nothing, technically, that keeps him from doing that. Now, if he knows it's active, I think there are federal requirements that keep him from doing that.
Yeah.
But, if there's no, I mean, eagles are migratory, so if they're not there, you know,
That response is not unheard of. I'm familiar with
Exactly.
in different endangered species, that
Right.
ones that they just go out and kill them and bury them.
yeah, and so again, and I'm kind of a broken record on this, deferring back to that local consultation and that monitoring and mitigation plan might be a better strategy, because then it isn't a hard and fast rule that we run into. And maybe that would never happen. I would like to believe that people are gonna prioritize eagles over the wind turbine payment, but
Okay. All right, so that's all I have for that section.
Can I stop in that section, Darren? But we have just a quick about kill takes, or
Yeah.
take permits.
Yeah.
How many is acceptable? How many can they apply for? Does anybody know that? How many kill takes can you take? It's for the AES people. How many, the wind energy people, are they allowed?
So the take permits are not on a eagle by eagle basis, it's on a project basis. So we look at the entire project, where the location of nests are near that project. We do recordings of eagle sightings from various points on the site. And then there's a calculation that U.S. Fish and Wildlife does to determine what the likelihood of eagle take is, and then they tell us whether or not the level of take is acceptable based on their population numbers, and they have a whole algorithm that they use to calculate that limit.
So how many turbines are you putting in and where are they gonna be? Has that been determined yet, so we know how many takes?
This
You don't
could
know that?
affect any
project,
any
right,
development,
project,
whether
right, I
they're gonna
understand.
put in, so
Yeah.
that's.
So I was just
And each of
curious.
those, if there were more than one, I assume they would vary.
And that's why I go back to
Oh.
Allison's question about each turbine, because you've got different topography and wildlife in one area, by Spirit Hollow, then you go 5 to 6 miles a different direction.
But
So
that
how
would be
do
part
we
of it, if you
know?
would talk to the local group or the federal, and you would say, okay, we're gonna put in 10 turbines, we're gonna put in 50 turbines, and they would look at it
Would they look at each
as an
turbine and
installation.
what's surrounding each turbine?
I assume they look at it.
That's what I'm
The way I
curious.
understood it, they just
Yeah.
look at it as a development, and the elevation will range,
I'm just
say
trying to
50
get-
foot, and they would be, whatever it is,
Yeah.
they would look at an installation.
Well, what I'm trying to avoid is getting into lawsuits where it's not done properly, the permitting and the taking. No, I'm just trying to.
No,
Yeah, because if they
I'm-
don't study like this turbine next to this, and they don't get the proper kill and take permit, there's ramifications for that, I would think.
Well, and
I try to-
I don't know, we aren't
Yeah.
designing this not to get sued, and there's
That's what
both
I'm
sides,
trying to
both
do,
sides.
too.
I
Yeah.
don't know, this is, we're making a good faith effort here, and I
Oh, I know
appreciate
you are.
what Chris has done with the, about the monitoring and mitigation.
And mine is just a protection of the county. is
Yeah,
what- if you
well,
guys- is what I'm trying to get at.
we appreciate that.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to avoid.
Rose, you're first.
Rose Fisher. So I guess I wanna make sure I understand, looking at what Trent's saying, he wants things in upfront that the board would approve if it's in the amended ordinance versus it's in a permit later that the conservation board gets to approve. Is that what I'm hearing?
I don't think so.
So you're jumping ahead if I can move forward, Jim.
Okay.
Okay, so the review and approval plan, as it's been cited, as Chris has cited it, I do really hope we change that. And so we have the wildlife monitoring mitigation plan shall be reviewed and formally approved by Des Moines County Conservation Board prior to approval of siting permit form and/or CVS by the Board of Supervisors. So this is what I think needs to happen, is before it even gets to the Conservation Board, we need to have public notice. And so the wildlife fire mitigation plan shall be publicly noticed. And then the public shall have, Moines County Conservation Board shall have public hearing. Public shall have an opportunity to show habitat. Habitat studies shall be done at developer's cost. And after the habitat study, review mitigation plans put forward, and then it can be looked at by the Board of Conservation, and then by the Board of Supervisors. And again, the reason I'm saying that is to protect everybody. Even when you talk about the recommendations from the DNR, part of what we look at in these is they look at known habitat, known places where they have these endangered species. Well, we don't know what we don't know. The public knows. Like, I know I have two lovebirds or doves that nest in my evergreen to the left of my house. I know I have cardinals that are out there every morning when I have my coffee. I know, everybody knows their own territory, right? So if somebody has an eagle nest, they know. Chris can't know you don't know where every eagle is in the county, right? Right. There's no way. So what this does, it protects the interest of the developer by saying, let's put the public notice up front. It protects the interest of the public by allowing for this notice so they can come forward. And then it also protects you guys, so it's not the first time this is publicly noticed is at the 11th hour and people are flooding into the room saying, wait, I have eagles here, I have a bat roost here, or whatever it may be. I think that we want to have this public notice up front, an opportunity for them to show the habitat, have that habitat study done, and then that's what the County Conservation Board looks at, and then that's what they bring to you when the final permit process goes forward.
Who does these studies? Does the developer do that, or are there private companies that do that, or is that the BNR?
It would be.
I can step in on that, sorry to interrupt you, AES. The studies that we do on birds and bats, as Libby has stated, are all done in coordination with the Fish and Wildlife Service, which means before we do them, the Fish and Wildlife Service approves the study process and makes sure that it is thorough. And then the company that does the study is not us, the developer. Like Libby said, it's a third-party company that gets their plan approved by the Fish and Wildlife Service. And that's all, of course, done to make sure that we have actual experts doing the work. I'm not an expert, so we have to make sure that we have somebody who knows what they're doing good. And we also, of course, want to make sure that there's no bad actors in the room. So it's all done through third parties and reviewed by the Fish and Wildlife Service and IDNR before we even do the work.
Thank you.
I do like the idea of having a requirement of a public input process.
Yeah.
I think that would be good to have.
I think that's good.
I've got one on this paragraph, Brian Carter. I think it's more a technicality, I like public input, I don't think you can have, I think public input in this process, I think public input's good stuff, so I think that's what we're here for. The way this reads, the county, if I'm reading this right, and this is more of a Trent question, it looks like the Conservation Board could possibly kill the entire thing by not formally approving whatever they're presented before it gets to the board. And I think that's a lawsuit waiting to happen, because they don't speak and are not elected like the Board of Supervisors. So I think they should make a recommendation, some different terminology for them to give something to the board, for the final decision to be handed to the board, not as a stopgap to prevent this, because, so, that's just mine.
So when you talk about cases like that, so in the case law on these, there's kind of these two tracks, right? A lot of these are going through whether there's, you're gonna hear the word, Jared, whether there's zoning or not, right? Your favorite, right? But a lot of them, whether there's zoning or not, when there's zoning, and this is what we'd get, like a similar rationale versus county supervisors where you're essentially using home rule versus a type of zoning ordinance, or here the conservation board. So the conservation board is going to be limited to the rules, so they're going to be limited to kind of the rules of the DNR. And any ordinance that we've put in place to limit the conservation board. Where you guys have home rule, so supervisors don't have those limitations. So in a lot of these cases, what we see, and most often it's with things like zoning, or say out of Henry County where they had a separate utility board, very similar. And that's why when they were talking so much about the 5-year plan, well, the utility board had to follow that 5-year plan, where you guys necessarily don't have to. So in short, I guess, this is a long meeting, so in short, Brian's right. You guys have much more leeway if it was to get denied, and that if we just got a negative recommendation from that board versus if they closed it down altogether, technically they have a set of rules that they're supposed to follow, and if it falls within that set of rules, then they are supposed to say yes, regardless of whether they think it's a good idea, bad idea, that a lot of that personal discretion is pulled away from those unelected boards.
I agree 100%. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll change that to recommendation.
Okay with you guys?
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Well, we did have a similar thing, Jared Lassiter, land use, similar situation for the emergency response plan for the fire departments and EMS, that the plan shall be reviewed and approved by those. So just for the sake of consistency here, since it's a similar situation, I think we probably want to adopt a similar language in those cases as well, that they're bringing their recommendation or endorsement to the board and not just in a complete, yeah.
I agree.
Okay, is that it then, Trent, Jared?
Well, we did have the last section was about the post construction monitoring and mitigation. So there is also a section D that details that the area shall be monitored by a licensed third-party professional for a minimum of 3 years. I think seeing that language in there now, the thing about the third-party professional, I see an opportunity then to basically replicate that language in B1 about the field studies beforehand, just so we're using that same standard, same terminology about the third-party professional, just to remove any potential bias from that. And basically, number 2 has a similar outline as section B, only this time it's after construction. So if issues are identified after the wind or solar farm is already in place, to identify mitigation strategies at that point, and so that it's not just, there is an opportunity to address those after the fact. That's all I have for the existing ordinance.
I've got a question on subparagraph A. It says, design modifications, yada, 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 yada. And it was such as painting one or more blades black or another dark color. What does that have to do with wildlife mitigation? And I'm sure this is another stupid question, but can somebody answer that for me?
So we can see.
Why, it says here that under mitigation strategies, it said such as painting one or more blades black or another dark color. Is that?
Colanders, the one county. So I read something about this online actually, and it's a mitigation strategy that's put in place to be more visual for wildlife and stuff, so it sticks out more.
Oh, during the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wanna say, we'd have to go back and look, I think that might have been something from like US Fish and Wildlife.
I think so.
Sighting of wind farms or something like that.
Okay.
It was in some kind of best practices or
I'd just never
something
seen
that we
that
saw,
before
but
and
then,
didn't know what.
Something I read that apparently it actually did help mitigate the impact.
Yeah, I can speak on this briefly. So we're aware of one study in Norway where they painted 4 turbines. One of the blades was black, and they saw preliminary results that avian mortalities were reduced. I know there's studies ongoing in the US to look into this, but we don't have the research to support it being a reliable mitigation strategy quite yet. And I know that the research here will need to coordinate with the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, prior to getting that signed off on as a mitigation strategy, just because that could affect how planes see the turbines. So I know it's an ongoing study, but I don't think it's quite there yet in the US.
Thank you.
Brad Coates, I guess my question on the minor mitigation, if there's an issue, what authority or ability does the Board of Supervisors have? Can they say, hey, we just dropped X number of bats or bald eagles or something out of the sky, shut them down? Is that an option? Until something's fixed or until whatever, instead of, well, we'll meet, 3 weeks from next Friday and talk about what we might be able to do in, 365 days. I mean, what's the ability of the Board of Supervisors when we realize there's an issue?
That's gonna also involve conservation as well.
Sure, with their recommendation, sure.
Until renewal of the permit, or whatever we're gonna call it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reality. Once the genie's out of the bottle, our ability to be immediate is almost non-existent. And, other than the $750 first day violation, $1,000 violation from then on, or having this permit, if we go with the rolling permit, it's kind of like we have this little 8-ounce hammer that's really good for maybe hanging pictures on the wall, but that's about it. And we have this 500-pound wrecking ball, and just nothing in between. And none of them are handy. None of them are in the tool belt. They're all, somewhere way off, and you have to go and get them. That's kind of the reality.
I almost think it has to be that way. You do your homework, Chris does his homework and say, okay, these are the risks, these are the mitigation, you know, that we've agreed upon for this or that. And then nobody that, you know, that's going to operate any sort of a business, they don't want somebody knocking on their door other day and said, you know, I saw 3 pigeons, or I saw an eagle, something like that. They have to report that. Just constantly trying to change the rules, that would be, I would assume that would be an extreme burden on anybody trying to operate a business. Go ahead.
Jared Lasser, land use. A key thing there, that's a key advantage of the post-construction monitoring mitigation, is that you have a specified period after the wind farm or solar farm is put into operation. If you're observing issues during that period, then conceivably, or at some point, if there are issues, it will come to light. And there's already that built-in system of ensuring that gets monitored. And so that's basically meant to be to understand how things would go throughout the lifespan. If something comes up, that major issues should come up during that initial review period. So that does provide the requirement that such impacts need to be reported to the board at the time.
And they would be reported, but we would not have a hammer to say this has to be changed by Tuesday. But it would be,
not
you know,
instantaneous, but it's being, yeah.
If you're gonna want this permit renewed in 2.5 years, you know,
Better take care of it.
you better take care of it, or it's not gonna get renewed. If we had the renewable permit, whatever we call it.
And again, that comes back to the monitoring and mitigation plan, so that will outline, you know, if this, then that strategy's in there. And so, again, come back to that mortality monitoring, if they're finding, you know, the things that are dropping from the sky, that's going to trigger
One of the mitigation.
Yeah, and then if they do not, then they're in violation of their mitigation plan, they're going to be against the full force of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the federal government then. So that's really, they probably carry more of a hammer than.
Yeah.
So the Rose Fisher, so this monitoring thing, how is that done? Are there people that go around every day and look? I mean, I'm asking because if I'm a landowner and I have a turbine and I'm getting tons of money and I happen to be out in my field and I see this, my incentive to bury it is pretty high.
The third party, the licensed professional third party that does the monitoring, and I don't know how that works. Is that something, do they have people that come by once a year? Do they come by once a month? How that works, I don't know.
I'm kind of assuming that the people that's on site, that's working for them, if they're honest people on site, they're gonna be monitored too, on a daily operation basis.
Yeah, yeah.
And one of the things, I mean, we've kind of decided here today that the plan's gonna run through Crest. But one of the things you can do is come up with a way that, you know, there's Ring doorbells out there. I tell you, the things we can see on Ring doorbells, you know, even 15 years ago, you would see high dollar, you know, security videos from a professional, you know, commercial security system, and it's grainy, you could barely tell what's what, and now you see one of those Ring doorbells, I mean, it's almost like HD TV, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah, about the tornado hit my house, my Ring doorbell across
but
the
it still
street.
comes down to who's gonna monitor it and who's gonna document it.
Right, so, I mean, if we wanted to say, hey, we want to have a third party that does these environmental studies, we can put in there that they be allowed to mount cameras on that structure. If we're talking a turbine and I don't know, how does solar play into this? Because we've not talked much about solar, but, you know.
City Newberry, so saying that, does that mean Moines County could do that for us? And charge them?
we're not a licensed third-party professional.
We're what?
So it says in here, it has to be monitored by a licensed third-party professional.
If
So
you
we
were
have to
gonna do-
hire a
If you're
firm.
gonna do that.
If you were gonna do that, you'd put it in the ordinance and say to monitor
With the use of.
camera, or however you would phrase it. And I don't know enough about it to know that.
As I say, I don't know enough about these either, and I don't know that we wanna get into dictating every little detail of how
Yeah,
they
I
go
don't
about
think so.
doing a study. It's just like doing archaeology studies. I mean, when Brian builds a road project, they gotta do environmental studies, they gotta do archaeology studies. They have to hire a third party. They have their own methods and strategies that are already reviewed. They know what those processes are, and I don't know that we wanna be in the dictating every little detail of what we're gonna monitor and how we're gonna monitor it. We could be here for years trying to figure out what that could be, when these are already out there in companies that already do these studies.
Darren Shea, Minneapolis. I've been reading ordinances around the country and in Iowa as well. But they did, in this question that you're talking about right now, about checking in on it, I thought it interesting that they had the board of supervisors occasionally themselves in their ordinance would have that, they could go out, just sporadically go out and check themselves. Gives them that ability to go out and do their own, if they want to take a quick check, they put that in the ordinance, which I thought was interesting. So you can see for yourselves what's going on, if there any mitigation, then you can contact a third party and say, we need to get somebody out there. To give you guys that leeway. Would that be something of interest?
If I start on somebody's property, I look for a shotgun first.
Well, I just read it, but they put that, they just put that in an ordinance, that they had a right to go check. Yeah. It's a county
I'm just being
officers
me, that's.
can go out at any time to do a check, an impromptu check, which I thought was kind of interesting, any county officer. So, anyway, just food for thought.
We actually, Jared Lasser, land use, we have a specific passage in there, it's in the, I'm trying to find it here, it's the, right now it's under communications and enforcement, Article 9. Exactly where it says that here. Where basically, so for section D in there, inspections and required access, the administrator shall be allowed access to a permitted CSES or CVES at any time in order to conduct an inspection and confirm compliance with all provisions of this ordinance at any point during construction or the operational lifespan or decommissioning. So essentially that the administrator would act on the county's behalf and as county staff and report any relevant information to the board as necessary.
When you say administrator, who's that referring to? When you say administrator?
Technically, right now, that would be us.
Okay, that's what I meant, I didn't know who.
Yeah.
But that, at any point, that could change to something,
Right.
or somebody else too, but
'Cause that's
at
kinda-
current time, that would be us.
The ordinance designates that as the land use
Okay,
administrator.
okay, that was my question. Okay, that's
So is
interesting.
that part of?
Anybody sees you come out to inspect their land, they're gonna have a shotgun.
I'm with you, I'm
Just-
looking for, I was gonna say, I'm with you, Tom, my first look is for the shotgun, so, a rifle, whatever, it's.
Quarterback,
Rose Fisher, so acting as the administrator, is that part of your land use contract or is that an additional fee to the county?
That's part of our contract.
part of their contract, not additional, not at all. It's something we've, since I've been on the board, we've had them under contract for land use.
That's the regional planning commission.
Yeah.
Allison Moore Yarmouth. I feel like while we have this open, we are missing the opportunity to put down some hard and fast regulations. I feel like we're leaving this too broad, we're leaving too much on Chris's shoulders. I don't understand why we would wanna open this up possibly so many times when there's just some really base things that we could get established that we're not doing.
As
Like,
what?
like you guys could be saving yourselves future headaches by like having some hard and fast things in here, like we're not putting in distinct setbacks for conservation. Like everything has to depend on this and this and this and study, like I don't understand why we wanna do that. Like this is the opportunity right now
Yeah,
to.
but some of that stuff we're not getting away from though. I mean, you know, just like when Brian was in here and he was talking about, you know, he has to do a bridge or something like that. Some of the studies that he has to do, it's not like we want to spend that money, but we're forced to go through that process because of bats or snails or whatever the heck is going on. So I mean, I'm not sure that we can make everything hard and fast is my point.
Is Rogues Road a private road?
Your name, please?
No, Walter Kemp. I live on Rogues Road, and I'd like to know whether it's a county road, state road, or a private road. All I can find is it is private road.
Is Brian still here?
So,
If that looks so here.
And I'm not familiar. I don't think we're- But we'll get the county engineer.
it's on the other side of the levee.
Well,
On,
get the county
Oh,
engineer
they're
here.
probably gonna be private.
Yeah, most likely it would be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's in the levy district,
it's Moines County, yeah.
but is it in part of the levy district?
Well, you know where Wonderlicks is, perchance, right on the road.
Yeah, we're talking about, yeah.
Right across there and back.
Yeah,
It's one of the ones that's right along the river.
5 houses
Yeah,
there.
I think that's in the levy district, and that's, most of those roads in there are private roads.
It's what?
Most of those roads in there are private roads.
Because, like I say, no, the county has never maintained it.
Right.
No gravel, no nothing
Yeah.
whatsoever.
Yeah.
Probably private road.
Yeah.
What I found was if the United States Highway Commission doesn't maintain it, the state of Iowa doesn't maintain it, the county doesn't maintain it, the owners own the road, it's private.
You can't spend money on a private road.
Yeah, and within the levy district, and you deal with this sometimes too, I think. But yeah, there's disputes over who pays for what in those roads sometimes. Because some of them will pay to get them maintained and some of them won't.
So we're thinking about putting an electronic gate in to stop the people from going in.
Yeah, I don't know.
Could that be possible?
You'd have to seek private counsel on that.
Actually, what you should do, this isn't about the wind ordinance. You should call Brian Carter. You call Secondary Roads and ask for Brian Carter, the county engineer. I'm confident he can answer all your questions.
So you guys don't know?
No, I don't know where road
It would take some
is.
research to determine who else has ownership, who you'd have to make sure has access.
Well, it's
I mean, it's not a decision that can be made like that.
Yeah.
Are you on leased
And
ground?
do they have an easement of right of way, just?
Is it leased ground?
No, it's
Federal ground?
They're
Federal
talking.
ground, do you lease it from them?
No, well, it's private owned.
Private owned, okay.
Privately owned, it's the levy district, so just north of us, kind of right off the river.
Crossing roads.
The abstracts.
What?
The abstracts in the house,
Is it?
on the ground on the side, that states that road is a private road.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's on the,
that'll be a private road. You can't, the county can't legally spend money on a private road. On a privately owned road.
Yeah, not to get off topic too much, but I think you need to clearly identify who all would need to have access and easement access, right-of-way access, so you can determine if you can block it off. But
well, we've got 5 and 5 of us already decided.
But there's additional lots that are in there, just make sure.
They're FEMA lots.
Sure. So I would take a look, I'd have an attorney, and I'd have an attorney look at it to make sure that.
Are we through with what we're doing today? Grant, are we through with ours?
I think we're done, yeah, I'm done with this. Anybody else?
And the only, one last thing I would mention, I think we're ending on, ending on section D there. One of the things I sent to Jared in an email was just that the operator shall submit an annual wildlife monitoring report.
Yeah.
So that we know what it is they're monitoring, how they're going about doing it, and that should all be pre-identified in how they're gonna do that, but I would like to see the annual reports that shows that it was, when it was, and that kind of stuff. So we'd add something like that in there. And then the only thing I would add it's not really wildlife, but it's ecological as well, is and I don't know necessarily where it goes in the ordinance, where it's best to put in the ordinance, but I had sent Jared a recommendation for battery storage and runoff and fire water management for a battery system. One of my concerns was if one of those catches fire, forms a leak, or if there's some sort of fire and, they gotta come in and douse it with water containment. What my concern is that could be some pretty nasty chemicals that would go down streams or waterways. Almost everything in Des Moines County drains to Flint Creek, and Flint Creek water is where Burlington gets its water. I think it might not be a bad idea to have something in there that has some sort of water controls or leakage controls. And so I sent some recommendations to Jared. I don't know necessarily where it's best to put those, but.
I noticed it says specifically 1,000 feet of conservation land, so, and part
And that
of.
was just an arbitrary, I was just trying to come up with some sort of arbitrary.
Yeah, because right now,
You wanted in there.
so the question then is, do we just say that, because right now it's based on the type of material in a battery system with the setbacks, that was based on our discussion with Lee County, that's up to the board here if we want to keep using that, but it's basically a 500 feet from the conservation area, or 1,000 feet from a conservation area if it uses lithium or sodium ion components for the battery. If not, then it's 500 feet. So another thought there is if we want to just avoid having to prescribe these types of requirements, we could just say that the requirement is 1,000 feet regardless from a conservation area, or even higher if we, given how many conservation areas there are, if we wanted to say that we want to prioritize that would avoid the need for having these additional requirements in here. But that's just another thought if we're just.
Well, even beyond
Chris is
conservation
worried
lands.
about the runoff from it, or
Right,
putting in,
right,
eventually getting into the stream.
Yeah, and we can certainly look at a way to address that that ensures that topic is accommodated into the.
Well, I think if we go with the 1 mile for all of this from conservation areas, I think that.
Well, I'm not even necessarily worried about the conservation areas. I mean, I'm not necessarily worried about a thing sitting close to, say, Big Hollow Recreation Area, because we're in the island. What I'm worried about is if we set a battery storage, commercial battery storage area close to any sort of water body or any sort of tributary stream that then either feeds into Big Hollow Lake or feeds into Flint Creek, and there is some sort of leakage, or there's a fire, and then that fire water is, that fire department comes in, sprays a bunch of water on it, where's that water gonna go? Can we have some sort of secondary containment system that water will run off to and contain, rather than just running over the land into whatever the next drainage is and then going God knows where? And then an inspection and sampling of containment systems during the first year, so that, I mean, it's not uncommon now to get 3, 4, 5, 6 inch rains. So if, I don't know exactly how those are built, but what if that inundates, just site inundates from rainwater, the groundwater penetration, site inundates that, and then I would like to know, is there anything getting off of here into local water?
Is there anything liquid in those batteries that could leak?
Assume so.
Well, then,
I don't know.
a containment
Yeah.
seems like a good idea. We've got,
Evie, is there anything liquid in them batteries that?
I don't think
would
they
need to
use
be-
batteries.
I wish I could help you, but I'm not the battery girl. Batteries.
I don't think they use batteries.
I thought that there was, and then it just.
But, yeah, that might be, I don't know, but if there was anything liquid in them, or if there's a fire, have a containment.
We can look into address,
Yeah.
just in general, not just conservation areas, but
Sure.
have some sort of language in there
Sure.
that makes that sense. In the chapter specifically on the best then.
And then just one last thing, and yeah, we can consult with people that are a lot smarter than me on that. And then just one last thing was environmental liability insurance requirement, and I think this is probably standard practice, but in case it isn't, I think it might be worth mentioning in there, in that developer, owner, or operator of any sort of commercial energy system shall maintain environmental liability insurance. So like in the case of, you know, a battery system leaking and getting into water, they've got some sort of insurance policy that then will come in, clean up those waters, restore it back, or.
And pay penalties.
Yeah, rather than, because I know we've got the, you know, bond issue for decommissioning and stuff like that, but I gotta believe that there's commercial insurance available if a turbine catches fire and all of that fiberglass is blowing off.
Whatever you need for
Right.
any riders you might need for wind or
And so, and
solar installation.
maybe that's in there, I
think it's, because it specifies about providing information about the insurance for, liability insurance for, wind or solar farm. I think if we just add language stating that needs to include the environmental provisions as stated, I think that makes sense.
Brad? Yeah, Brad Coates, and I know we're trying to wrap up. We talked last time, I think, Tom, you brought it up about land, Flint Creek's right through it. So the landowner saying, hey, if that spills and it's on the landowner, you were asking, I think, for specific language that the landowner is not responsible for.
Well, not responsible, obviously, for
Yeah,
liability, but also for penalties.
Right, so did that get in there is my question. Did we put that in?
We talked about it, I have not reviewed any changes that might have been made.
We haven't addressed
But,
that.
yeah,
Okay.
and the reason was precisely because of Mechanicsville, it's because they had some oil, the nacelle, that, I think it's a nacelle up there, and they didn't know, and anyway, they heard from the DNR that the DNR holds the landowner responsible for environmental damages and penalties, and we don't want that. So, no, I will have my, watch it, but I will have my.
I think Jared's got that.
We'll have to look into how best to address that.
And I'm still working on the, I said I'd try to find out amount coverage. I found people that clean these up, and take them apart, then they clean up the land. If they have to scrape a couple inches of soil off of it to get stuff, they do that. So anyway, so I'm working on it.
I can't imagine how.
Is that, well, I guess I don't know if it really matters, but is that for solar or?
Well, that
both?
for wind, that's what they do. Anyway, so, because I want an idea what it costs to clean land up and stuff, so that we would have enough insurance, they would have enough insurance.
I don't know if Trent remembers the little gas station up there where the dog groomers at in Danville.
Oh, yeah.
They dug that whole thing up because they had a tank that was leaking gas. They took it and they spread it out on a field. And it sat there for what, 4 or 5 years?
I don't know, when I was at Camp Dodge, I was
Yeah.
part of that hazardous, I was part of the team that would do that. And the M1 Abrams are, a miracle of modern warfare. But I tell you, when they spring a leak, those puppies leak.
Yep.
And we would go out and we would dig, depending on how long it sat, because the garden might sit for a month, right? And we would dig things out, and that's what we do. We had spots on posts where we would go, and we would go out about every couple of days with just a grater and just churn it. But it was on concrete, and we'd let the sun kind of dry out, and that fuel, that leak, that oil, that leak would kind of evaporate off. I don't even know all the science, man. Maybe they treated it after we got it there, but yeah, you would dig down deep to get all that stuff out, and you just lay it out there. It'd take a while, but it'd get
We're growing corn on it now, so it evidently works.
Yeah.
That's been 20 years ago.
There you go. Yeah.
Anyway, I just, I forgot.
Okay.
Rose, did you have
That's good,
one more
'cause we don't
thing?
know
I
what
did.
Well, no, I know.
Okay, let's hear it.
Is there a work session next week, and what will we be covering?
That's yet to be determined, but there will be a work session.
It will be on the
Chris, I just sent you
agenda.
an email.
Yeah.
I read some
It will
of
be
it.
on the agenda.
He just, I just read that. I haven't had a
Yeah,
chance
we're
to
not
read
gonna
it. He said it's
let you go by without coming in here every week.
I didn't think so.
So the next one, if we're going in order,
I wanted you to see how I did.
we go from wildlife to road use.
Yeah, revenue said
So
it's
Brian is the next
I don't know
round.
if we're gonna have a whole lot of
That'll work for
conversation
me.
without having to ask
Maybe if
Ask
it's road
Brian
use,
about it.
road use, and then maybe jump into something else.
I suspect the specific stuff related to.